Here now on BBC One, it's the 9 o'clock news with Sue Lawley.
The Syrians release an American airman and call on President Reagan to pull his troops out of Lebanon. Pressure's growing in Washington too. The frozen north, winter comes to Britain. Tea up, perhaps by 5 pence a packet. Back with Dad, the boy who went looking for his mum. And Six of the Best, a television debut for the Waltons.
She was the biggest one when she was born.
Good evening. President Reagan is under increasing pressure tonight to withdraw American troops from Lebanon. In Damascus this morning, the Syrians released an American airman they'd been holding a prisoner to help, they said, with withdrawal of US forces. And in Washington tonight, Democratic Party leaders are deciding whether to stop supporting American involvement in Beirut. But today was the first working day of 1984, a presidential election year. And it was one of the Democratic runners, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who stole the first campaign limelight. Overnight, he had negotiated the release of the first American prisoner of war since Vietnam, Lieutenant Robert Goodman, captured by the Syrians at the beginning of last month. It took the Reverend Jackson 5 days to persuade President Assad to release Lieutenant Goodman. And although it was a personal triumph for the civil rights campaigner, he was anxious to share the credit.
Just 1 second, Florence. It is now appropriate. The point is that this is a victory for everybody. It was not a political attack during this very political season back home upon anybody, but a moral appeal to President Assad.
Before boarding an Air Force plane to fly them home, the presidential candidate asked everyone involved to put their hands together in a symbol of unity. Martin Bell in Washington reports on the impact Jackson's mission has had across the United States.
Jesse Jackson's triumph was all the more remarkable because he went to Damascus in the face of every official discouragement and every prediction of failure. Yet he pulled it off. And in an election year, when television images count for so much, he was able to appear on the network news shows one after the other with Lieutenant Goodman beside him, and the only captive remaining was the captive audience.
The first opportunity that you will have to speak to your parents, to Marilyn and Bob, and to Terry and the children.
How y'all doing? I'm feeling pretty good, and hope to see you tonight sometime. I'm feeling pretty good, no problems, and glad to be out of here.
The president, back at the White House from his holidays, was delighted with the success, or said he was. At the start of Mr. Jackson's mission, he hadn't even returned his phone calls, and had a meeting today with his special Middle East ambassador, Donald Rumsfeld, who in his last visit to Damascus hadn't actually raised the Goodman issue. However,
we, as I say, are very pleased with this, and now Ambassador Rumsfeld will be leaving this evening for Lebanon, and we will, with renewed spirit, continue our efforts and our negotiations to advance the cause of peace in Lebanon.
But those efforts are meeting mounting criticism at home. Walter Mondale, the leading Democratic contender for the presidency, launched his 1984 campaign today with a strong attack on the president's defense and foreign policies. He paid graceful tribute to Jesse Jackson's success in Damascus and called again for the withdrawal of American Marines from Beirut.
A president cannot ad-lib foreign policy. He cannot delegate war and peace. He cannot turn strategy over to his staff. And a president cannot ask Americans to risk their lives for a policy no one's in charge of and no one understands. And for that and other reasons, I have called for a withdrawal of our Marines from Beirut.
So far as there was a bipartisan truce here on Lebanon policy, that truce is now over. Democrats are out getting whatever advantage they can, none more successfully than Jesse Jackson, and the president has to be looking for a way out.
The American Marines are dug in around Beirut's international airport. Following last October's bomb attack, which killed 241 men, peacekeeping appears to be taking second place to self-protection. The Americans seldom venture outside their base, which increasingly takes on the appearance of a camp under siege, as new defences are dug to protect the Marines from suicide bombers. And the French, understandably nervous after losing more than 80 of their men, are also on the defensive. Nearly 500 troops, a quarter of their contingent, is being moved from Beirut to southern Lebanon. Inevitably, the move has fueled speculation about a gradual withdrawal of the multinational force. Many Lebanese are alarmed at what might happen if the peacekeeping forces were to pull out completely. Rival factions would certainly attempt to fill the vacuum, and that could be enough to tip the country into a new civil war. The Italians patrol the refugee camps, and their presence has done much to reassure the survivors of the massacres at Sabra and Shatila. But the Italian force is to be cut from its present strength of 2,000 to 1,000. The British contingent has also been highly visible. Their elderly ferret scout cars are a familiar sight on their daily runs through the Beirut suburbs. Their main job is to provide security for rival Lebanese factions whenever they meet to negotiate a new ceasefire. It's a task which has earned them respect from all sides, and the local population seems genuinely friendly.
At home, the Foreign Office confirmed tonight that there are no plans to pull Britain's peacekeeping force out of Lebanon. The opposition leader, Neil Kinnock, made it plain today that he thinks they should come out. Mr Kinnock, who was leaving for Athens on his first official visit abroad, said of the 100 British soldiers in Beirut, they're doing a superb job, but that still doesn't make them justifiable as targets. Today, Israeli planes have been attacking what they say is a Syrian and Palestinian base in the mountains east of Beirut. Their target was near Baham Doun, and the bombs set an ammunition dump on fire. The Israelis claim to have hit a hotel used as a headquarters by Syrian-backed PLO guerrillas, but reporters at the scene say they hit the wrong building. The only casualties were apparently 4 civilians who were slightly injured. It's thought the Israelis' motive was to keep up the pressure on the Syrians and Palestinians, and it may also be a reprisal for recent attacks on Israeli forces in the south of Lebanon. Tunisia's President Bourguiba has declared a state of emergency after days of rioting over increases in the price of food. There have been clashes in the capital of Tunis. Reports say as many as 26 people may have died. President Shagari of Nigeria, overthrown in a coup at the weekend, is tonight said to have been brought to Lagos in handcuffs and taken to an army barracks for questioning. Major General Buhari, who led the coup, has now lifted the curfew, and the new Supreme Military Council has been sworn in. There's concern in some quarters that Nigeria could start an oil price war because it urgently needs foreign exchange. But General Buhari says Nigeria will stay in OPEC. And the country today repaid the first instalment on an international bank loan, raising hopes that it can cover its debts. There's been another day of talks in the shipbuilding dispute, which threatens to lead to a national strike on Friday. For the first time, the unions and management at British shipbuilders have met round the same negotiating table at the conciliation service ACAS. Up till now, they've stayed in separate rooms with ACAS officials. The dispute is about pay and productivity, and as our labour relations correspondent John Fryer reports, it may still need a lot more negotiation before it's settled.
The employers arrived at ACAS saying there's still a big gap between them and the unions. The chief union negotiator didn't disagree with that, though he chose to remain optimistic. None of Britain's shipyards has a secure future, and some have no orders. They're nearly all in areas of high unemployment, but that hasn't intimidated the unions into accepting British shipbuilders' productivity proposals. The management's document calls for a major shake-up in shop floor attitudes and maintains that to succeed will require a fundamental change in the basic approach to our business, and the active support, acceptance and cooperation of all employees is crucial. So far, that support's been lacking. Shipbuilding's steeped in tradition, and management says is dogged by time-consuming demarcations and unreal who-does-what disputes. Take the handling of steel plates. If the steel's more than 1/8 of an inch thick, it's handled by a man in the Boilermakers Union. If it's thinner, it's the sole preserve of another union, the sheet metal workers. Management wants to sweep all this away, but it's a lot for the unions to stomach, especially the Boilermakers. They're the industry's main skilled union and are jealous of their craft. Now management wants them to be jacks of all trades, carrying out basic tasks instead of waiting for other tradesmen. For instance, they could remove and refit pipes or panels which get in their way, do small painting jobs, and even tidy up after themselves. The unions point out that demarcations have been gradually easing, but with 14 unions involved, change is too slow for management, which is aiming to match European output levels. But there's a worrying cynicism in the yards. Pay rates for skilled men aren't high by national standards, and many workers think that even if they swallow all the productivity package, it won't guarantee their yards have a long-term future. So they've little to lose by going on strike.
And now the weather and the winter storms which swept across much of Britain today seem to be easing tonight, and slightly warmer weather is on the way. In Ireland, 8 people died in the gales there. A family of 4 were killed when a tree fell on their car, and 4 other people were drowned when their boat capsized on a lake. Several ships have been in difficulties off South Wales and the West Country, and in northern Scotland many roads are blocked by snow, and power failures have affected Aberdeen and Inverness. Kate Adey reporting.
Scottish sheep got a particularly nasty new year as snow and high winds swept over the Highlands and Grampian. And though Scotland's ski resorts are boasting much more snow than most of those in Europe, getting there is difficult because of blocked roads. Rail, air and ferry services have all been disrupted and power supplies interrupted in the north and west. The borders have also seen bad weather, and in Northumberland a caravan park on the coast at Cresswell was hit by winds of over 90 miles an hour. 40 caravans were damaged. In Cumbria, there were blizzards, and as usual, the M6 at Shap Fell was among the first roads to give drivers problems. And in South Wales, a 500-ton gas tanker broke her moorings off Milford Haven. Her crew had to be rescued by helicopter as she drifted towards rocks, but she was later taken in tow by tugs.
The IRA have said they killed Gregory Elliott, the part-time member of the Ulster Defence Regiment who was shot last night in Castle Derg, County Tyrone. Mr Elliott, who was 25, was ambushed outside his home near the border. Gunmen opened fire at close range as he was getting into his van. He was the 138th member of the regiment to be murdered and the first victim of the Troubles in Northern Ireland in 1984. Detectives hunting the Harrods bombers have been talking to motorists who use a North London car park. They believe the car used in the bombing was left at the park near Edgware Underground Station on the day before the explosion, and they're hoping commuters may remember seeing it and its driver. 6 workers at the Sellafield nuclear reprocessing plant who contracted cancer have been paid undisclosed compensation, but British Nuclear Fuels have not admitted responsibility for their illness. William Waldegrave, the government minister involved, has revealed in a letter to a Labour MP that the company recognised the employees' work there may have been a factor in their illness. But the MP, in receipt of the letter, Brian Sedgemore, claims this amounts to a government admission that, quote, on the balance of probability, the plant is not safe. The first French milk to go on sale in Britain is on its way to the shops tonight after being released from Newhaven docks. It had been impounded for a week for health and quality control tests. It's the second consignment of long-life milk to come into the country. The first was rejected because of its high water content. Well, whichever milk you choose, your cup of tea is going to cost you more. Just as December's increases are working their way through to the shops, dealers at the weekly London tea auction have had to pay up to 20% more for some grades. It will eventually mean an extra 4 to 5 pence on a standard packet of tea.
There's been a worldwide shortage of tea for some time, and wholesale prices doubled in the last 4 months of 1983. But on the London tea market today, the upward trend went one dramatic stage further, because the Indians are now restricting their exports substantially in order to satisfy growing demand at home. The British much prefer the strong Indian tea to any other variety, but with the price rising so fast, will we now start drinking less of it?
No, I don't think that will happen, because although the prices moved up, it's moved up from what we considered really was a low level. And the price of a cup of tea today is still the cheapest drink in the world, bar water.
But the fact remains that the price of tea bought in the shops has gone up by 40% in less than a year, and it'll soon go up again. Indeed, a packet of tea is likely to cost 10% more by the spring.
In China, 8 more executions have been reported in the past week as the government tries to stamp out serious crime. The authorities hope that a combination of stiffer sentences and widespread publicity of trials and executions will help restore respect for the law. Our Far East correspondent Brian Hanrahan has been looking at the campaign.
A Chinese court hears a quarrel between two brothers about house ownership. The brothers can't agree, so they're arguing their case before a panel of judges from the People's Court. There are few formalities and no frills. Only their fountain pens indicate that the judges have any special status. The president has a law degree. The rest were teachers until they were transferred to the legal system. The court fees, paid by the loser, are 3 days' wages, and the hearing is taking place within a week of the case being reported. The government is trying to restore the status of the law, and recently the courts, both high and low, have been busy with a countrywide campaign against crime. Pictures of public trials and convicted criminals are on display outside the courts. Long lists of men sentenced to death are posted up on walls in both town and country. The red ticks mean the executions have been carried out. Every district has its own posters, and they're still going up. New posters are stuck over the old ones. There's no official count of the number of executions, but diplomats estimate that there have been 5,000 people killed since the crime crackdown began. Observers think that what happens is that each district is given its quota of executions, which have to be filled. And that means that crimes are attracting more serious sentences than they used to. This poster behind me says that 13 people have been executed for a mixture of robbery, theft, and causing personal injury. Death as a deterrent has a long history in China, and other wall displays nearby hammer home the message. A series of cartoons show what criminals have done and how, inevitably, they're caught and punished. The Chinese characters say, "You can't get away with it."